Do you guys remember the early days of the internet when some of your classmates or friends would have sent you these memes that had a girl in the center stage with some big fat titties, like nice cleavage, or a plump ass, and underneath it was written with small subtitles, if you're reading this, you're gay. Because the idea was that if you're distracted long enough to be able to read, that's not very heteronormative, right? So that was the joke. And I noticed that the game journalists have posted this. Like, they were given the early review copy of Stellar Blade before anyone else had the chance to play it. And instead of admiring the character, they were looking at the graffiti on the wall. So I know what happened for them in school when they received that type of meme. But all jokes aside, they considered this to be extremely racist, extremely offensive, so much so that the developers had to change this. And what's interesting is that there were a lot of people on Twitter that were saying, oh, see, this is why you need consultants. This is why you need to hire companies like Sweet Baby in order to avoid this type of controversy. Which is hilarious because the controversy was completely manufactured. And you notice that the game journalists released articles about this within minutes of each other. So I would assume it was coordinated at some level. Like maybe they met on a Zoom call or on a Discord or they DM each other. I don't really know, but like all these articles came out in a couple of hours. And if you guys actually happen to work at some of these major publications, you know that they have editors, that they need to approve the article first. It's not like posting something on Twitter that can be done instantaneously. It takes time to actually publish an article. So they all published the same article within a couple of hours. And the company had to change this from hard air to hard crime, I think. Like they changed it in some way. But the question is, like, is it really racist, though? And if you think that a South Korean development studio sneaked this in a video game with the purpose of making political social commentary about race relations in the United States of America, you're either completely delusional or you must be a grifter. There is no in-between. And the reason that I say it's grifting is because there are a lot of consultants, there are a lot of companies that literally work in order to help your game not offend people. So I strongly believe that these companies have some connections with the gaming press. Now, the interesting thing about the gaming press, and many people say, well, yeah, but like they don't really sell video games, or who cares about what the gaming press writes? And the answer is the shareholders. The shareholders definitely care what the gaming press writes, especially big publications like IGN. That is literally their purpose. Because shareholders, some of them don't even play games. They don't really care about the game, but they do care if their investment is going to have a financial return. And if they see that the game is controversial, that it's upsetting the market, and they look at that based on what the press says, then they're less likely to invest. They're more likely to sell their shares. And this is why the industry actually cares about game journalists. The customers don't. I mean, the customers are more likely to listen to streamers. They're more likely to listen to people like Angry Joe or Asmongold or The Quartering or whatever streamer they have that they favor over whatever the press has to say. I mean, most of the press, besides probably IGN, is a two-view anyway. Like, who reads Kotaku nowadays, right? They're not influential with the customer. But again, they are influential with the shareholder, and this is why the grifting companies are making a profit. Because they're like, okay, well, if you guys don't hire us, then the press is going to write bad articles. And we actually see this happening with Wukong. Again, it's just an assumption. Like, I don't know if there's any connections or not, but it's kind of sus. It's kind of sus that every single time you have one of these companies that allegedly do not want to work with consultants, the press starts writing all these negative articles. And when you have a company that does work with the consultants, for example, Baldur's Gate 3, then it's fine to show naked titties, it's fine to actually show sex scenes. It doesn't seem that Sony is bothered by it, even though like you have implicit pornographic material in it, sex with demons, sex with bears. Like all of that does not get scrutinized whatsoever. But a game like Stellar Blade, which doesn't have a single sex scene in it, everyone is going around about rampant sexism in the game and misogyny and all that other nonsense. And I do think that it's connecting to the grifting. I do think that it's connected to the diversity consultants. But what it also does to the culture indirectly is this idea that every single game needs to cater to American sensibilities. So basically, people in South Korea have to know the concept of what a hard R is from an American perspective, that they have to know on why that is offensive, and they also must make sure that they avoid it in their game. Now, take into account that usually when you have a game like Stellar Blade and you have like this massive universe, this thing is probably randomized. I mean, it's not really accurate to say AI generated because in 2024, like, people associate that concept with a different thing. But it's literally that. Like, you have a program that has, like, what type of graffiti goes on walls, and then it's being randomized everywhere, right? Like, they don't actually design it by hand. I mean, maybe they do in this case, but it's a lot of work. It's not efficient. And if there are tools that can do that, why exactly would you want to have like a designer just like put the R shop here and then put the hard thing, right? There's no malice behind this. They don't want to offend anyone. Like, obviously they're happy with Americans buying their product. They don't want to upset people. But we live in a world where it is assumed that that's what you want, right? And everything needs to cater to the American sensitivities. In other words, they call themselves diverse. They like to say that they're for diversity, but they want everything to be California. Like, you go into your basic bitch Californian corporation, you look at how they expect their workers to behave, and they want every single thing that creates culture to be like that. So it kills diversity. Like, unironically so. And they look at anime, and they don't like themes that they see in anime. Like, for instance, they don't like fan service. Or they don't like... in Goblin Slayer, they do not like the themes there, or they don't like the themes in Attack on Titan. And again, it's like, oh, these themes are problematic. But it's like, problematic for whom? Like, they're in Japan. They're making culture from their experience, from the Japanese experience. For whom is it problematic, though? And the answer is it's problematic for America, and if it's problematic for the American viewers, then it needs to be censored. And I know that most Americans don't even agree with this concept. Like, they're not asked, they're not polled. This is not a democratic process. It's a grifting process, right? But they created the illusion. They're selling the gaslight that this is what Americans actually want to see. So if you're making a product, it doesn't matter if you're in Zimbabwe, it doesn't matter if you're in Japan, it doesn't matter if you're in South Korea. If you're making a product, you need to cater to American sensibilities. And of course, Americans don't have to cater to Japanese sensibilities, because we noticed that with Ubisoft. We noticed with Yasuke. Like, Japanese people just wanted a time to shine as well. Like they expected that the story in Ubisoft is going to be 100% about Japan. It's going to be 100% about, well-renowned, established Japanese folklore heroes. And instead you get hip-hop music, and again, more Americans injecting themselves into the story. So, yeah, like, 100% killing diversity. Like, everything needs to be Americanized. Another example also from Ubisoft, many people didn't pick up on this for some reason, the new Prince of Persia. So the new Prince of Persia, you don't get to play as the prince, and the action doesn't take place in Persia. Again, you play as this Californian hero with his hair that's half-shaven, hip-hop music, of course, right? And I think it takes place in Egypt or something like that. You need to actually go rescue the prince because you play as the immortals. So, yeah, no more diversity. Everything needs to be uniformity. And if you look at the grifting companies, the ones that actually guide the storyline and the character design, they're actually a handful of people. Now, if you happen to be like the best writer in the world, if you happen to be the most experienced writer that the world can possibly find, if you're going to be the only person that's writing for all these companies, eventually the work is going to look the same. Because there's no way around it. Like, a person only has so much creativity. So in the end, you have like around 100 people working for these various grifting companies that are the writers. And they're the ones writing the stories for these AAA companies, which sell their products to millions of people. And this is why, like, the stories, they aren't that different. Like, you get to see the same themes. You get to see the same looking characters. You get to see the same type of dialogue in all of these games. And it's due to this. It's due to the fact that the industry right now is being gatekept by a couple of people, which are pushing their ideology and their worldview onto every single entertainment product, and they're now trying to do this even on the East. They're trying to do it on the Eastern market, on Japan, on South Korea, on China, and they're absolutely livid when you get to see a game like Wukong or when you get to see a game like Stellar Blade that the market is really enthusiastic about these games because they're scared that the shareholders that we spoke about earlier is going to stop listening to the press. Because even they are going to eventually notice that, hold on a little bit, like this is kind of weird. Because back in the day, what happened like around 2016, if you made a problematic game, you could actually get canceled on Twitter. So you'd have like Twitter activists doxing and harassing and doing their best, contacting advertisers, doing all of these things in order to get the company into trouble. And the company was like, well, we don't want to deal with that shit. Let's just get the consultants on board so that if there's any controversy, then the consultants get into trouble, not us. We did our due diligence, right? But now it seems that Twitter is incapable of canceling game developers that do this. They're basically incapable of dealing with the video game like Hogwarts. Like they tried to boycott it didn't work. They're incapable of doing anything to Stellar Blade. They tried to boycott it didn't work. They're incapable of doing anything with Wukong. So now the shareholders are like, well, hold on a little bit. Like this is a paper tiger now. In fact, the opposition, like people that side with Grooms and Asmongold and Arch and others, they're the ones that are actually dictating the culture now, de facto, with their wallets. And we got to see this with Suicide Squad. We got to see this with Forspoken. We got to see this with many other games that came out. And, the whole Gamergate 2.0 with the Sweet Baby controversy. A lot of games lost sales due to that. So I do think that it's coming to a point where the shareholders are realizing, yeah, on the internet, it's not really the grifters that are holding the power anymore. I mean, they're definitely in decline, and it seems that there's a different type of consumer now, which does have some level of consumer awareness. And we noticed this with Stellar Blade. Like, the moment they censored the costumes, there was actually backlash. And what's even worse than that was with Helldivers. Like, Helldivers was a very popular game, beloved by many, but the moment they made the decision to have you require making a Sony account, a PlayStation account, many people went and refunded the game on Steam as a protest. And it was such a significant number that Helldivers had to backpedal. So yeah, I do think that the reality is different than what people believe. People believe that social justice activists, or whatever you want to call them, they still have the power and authority on the internet and they can still do whatever they want. But the reality contradicts this belief. The reality shows that no, actually gamers are becoming aware, that they're becoming conscious in their purchasing power, and they are willing to actually punish companies that insult them, that mock them, that slander them, or that they put a sanitized, bland, boring product just because the activists told them to do so. So yeah, I think we're going to have like 2, maybe 3 more years of this, and then hopefully the industry will heal. Hopefully we will have the same games we used to have before 2014. One can only hope. I do expect a lot of AA companies are going to be successful and they'll become AAA. And I also expect that a lot of companies from the East, like Shift Up, for example, is going to actually increase in popularity, and they're going to start providing more and more games. Let me know what you guys think, though, and if you like my videos, there's a link into the pinned comment. It will take you to my live stream. I live stream there every single day, and of course you can interact with me if you go there. So, take care.